LinkedIn News.
What is an activity that you enjoy that doesn't cost anything?
That's Meik Viking, author and founder of the Happiness Research Institute. I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better. Stay tuned for more tips on how to stay both connected and cozy this winter. Don't forget to hit that follow button to get new episodes of our show every week. And if you like this episode, I have a favor to ask. Consider leaving us a review so we can bring you more of the conversations you love. If you don't know how, here's how to leave a review on Apple or Spotify. On Apple, go to the Everyday Better podcast page, scroll to the bottom, and click the number of stars you want to give. Then right below that, click Write a Review and add your note to us. If you're a Spotify listener, go to our page, click the three dots next to the settings wheel, and select Rate Show. We so appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better, a personal development podcast where every week I sit down with some of the world's brightest minds and bravest hearts who use science and story to share strategies for how we can flourish individually, in relationship to others, and to the world around us. There are times I want to explain something, but I just can't seem to find the words. Or to be more specific, I can't seem to find the English words. One of the best examples of a non-English word that so perfectly captures a feeling we can all relate to is Hygge, or Hygge, or Hygge. We all pronounce it probably a little bit wrong. Hygge is a Danish word that roughly translates to a quality of coziness and the feeling of inner warmth and contentment. Now, winters are pretty long and dark in Denmark. Come December, it gets dark by 3 p.m. At the peak, 17 of the 24 hours in a late December day are dark. Imagine that. So to combat the feelings of gloominess and loneliness that come with a lack of daylight, the Danes take great care to create cozy spaces. They light candles, cuddle up under warm blankets, and drink hot beverages with friends. All that helps to foster a really super cozy and connected environment. Today's guest, Meik Viking, is an expert in Hygge. Meik's the author of The Little Book of Hygge, a New York Times bestseller about how to make life a little bit cozier. He's also the founder and CEO of the Happiness Research Institute and has done a ton of work investigating the source of human happiness and well-being. So settle in and get cozy for my conversation with Meik.
My entire career is basically dedicated to three fairly simple or complex questions, depending on where you look at it. So I try to figure out together with my team, how do we measure happiness or the good life? Secondly, why is it that some people are happier than others? And thirdly, what can we then do to improve quality of life?
Talk to me about happiness, though, because I think actually a lot of the challenge comes for people when they think about what happiness is and what it is not. So how would you define that?
To me, happiness is a dish with many different ingredients on it. One of them is a sense of meaningfulness. Aristotle talked about that more than 2,000 years ago. I think that's still a key component in happiness. But I think it's also beyond that sense of purpose or meaning in life. I think it's also a feeling of joy, positive emotions, and the sense of satisfaction with your overall life. Mm-hmm. So super wide, but I think we need that wide definition to capture all the different sort of angles and perspectives that people have on happiness. Also, when we ask people, what is happiness to you? We do that in the Happiness Museum here in Copenhagen, and people write their answers down on Post-its. We also see a jungle of different angles. There's a lot of relationships, moms, dads, husband, wives, sons, daughters, friends. There's a lot of people writing music. There's a lot of people writing food, pizza night, mom's apple crumble. There was one person writing, happiness is a good quality lawnmower and a big lawn to mow. And the older I get, the more I get that answer. But the point is, happiness is often many different things to different people. So we need this wide definition of happiness. And sometimes people get scared of that. How do we then sort of use it in a scientific way? And what we need to do there is we simply just need to break it down and then look at the smaller components it consists of. And it's something we are familiar with doing when we look at other complex phenomenons. If we talked about how's the US economy doing, we would break that down into inflation, unemployment rate, interest rate, GDP per capita growth. And that gives us a language to talk about how is the American economy doing. So that's also what we need to do with happiness. We need to talk about meaningfulness, as you're doing on this show. We need to talk about, did we experience joy yesterday, or did I laugh today? Do I have a sense of connection with other people? So I think we need to sort of cover different areas of that spectrum.
I like the wide definition because it gives us lots of ingredients to work with. And it also, I think it also allows space for the different experiences we have. So if you were to walk up to someone right now and say, "Are you happy?" I don't know that we could answer that. I think people have a challenge with figuring out what the definition of happiness is, but then also pinpointing exactly what it is and if in that moment they feel happy. And actually, the way that I got to you and the reason I really wanted to talk to you is because I am from California originally, and coming to the East Coast and going anywhere where there's a true change in seasons every few months. Something I discovered at first was how much I loved winter in New York. What you learn as you stay longer, if you're not as familiar with it, is, magical in November, December, January a little bit, and then February is like the longest month of the year, and everyone's waiting for spring. And so if you had asked me last December if I were happy, I would have said no. And I was allowing a lot of the season outside, and then also things that were happening in my own life to make me feel, quote unquote, unhappy. And as I was talking to this show's producer, I said, we were talking about winter and how I was sort of trying to set myself up for a better winter, but I was also like dreading it. She said, "You should just hygge your home." And I was like, what? I don't even fully understand. And now that I do, and I want you to talk all about it, I'm like, oh, I can go into winter like the Danish do, fully prepared with a million candles and blankets. And like, I have a bunch of knitting things set up for myself so I can really actually get cozy in a season that I would typically say is not a quote unquote happy season. Talk to me about hygge. Tell me if I just said it wrong.
I think your Danish is excellent. Well done. Hygge, I think the best short definition is the art of creating a nice atmosphere. It has to do with connection. It has to do with feeling consciously cozy. It has to do with making the best of the situation. Danes, we have hygge throughout the year, but it's a survival strategy for winter. It's making the best of the situation. It's, putting on the simmering stews and enjoying a glass of wine and a good book by the window when there's a rain and storm outside. So it's basically going Game of Thrones on the seasons, right? It's saying winter is coming and it's going to be great. And one of the anecdotes I typically tell to explain people what hygge is happened a few years ago in Sweden with a group of friends, where we had been out hiking in December and came back to the cabin in the afternoon as the sun was setting. And we got into our comfy clothes. We got the fire going in the fireplace. We poured some wine. We had prepared a stew, so we got that on the stove and that started to boil. So those were sort of the sounds you could hear, the fire in the fireplace, the stew boiling. And we were relaxing, enjoying each other's sort of silent company. And then one of my friends said, "Could this be any more hyggelig?" And then one of the girls said, "Yes, if there was a storm outside." Because hygge is also this feeling of being sheltered from the outside. So it is preparing for winter and knowing that you got things, under control. But just to sort of go back, I wanted to comment on what you said. If people had asked me right now, am I happy? I don't know, but it goes up and down. It goes up and down in your life, it goes up and down in my life, and it goes up and down in everybody's lives when it comes to happiness levels. And that's the interesting area to explore. Because if we just ask you now, are you happy? That's one data point, and that's interesting to hear. But even more interesting is if we ask that on a daily basis over the next 10 years. Because then we get to understand, is Leah happier on Fridays than she is on Mondays? Is Leah happier when she goes to the park in New York than compared to the office? And researchers have done that, collected millions and millions of data points to understand under what circumstances do people thrive, under what circumstances do people feel happier. And we see a lot of things you would expect. People are typically happier on Fridays and Saturdays than they are on Mondays and Tuesdays.
Shocker.
Thank you, Big Data, for that nugget of wisdom. Yeah. People are happier in countryside when they're parked by the sea than they are in urban environments. So I think that's the key to good happiness research, that we follow large groups of people over time and ask the same questions again and again. Because then we bypass that we might have a different perspective on exactly what happiness is, because it's your perspective that I'm interested in, and I want to understand under what circumstances do you feel happier.
So I went to go see Into the Woods, and there's a line in this song, and the song's called Moments in the Woods. And the lyric goes, if life were made of moments, then you'd never know you had one. And so the idea is like, there is good and bad, but you only know, it's kind of like the saying, you only know the sunshine if you've seen the rain. And so as you're talking about happiness, I am wondering, people find they're happier, in the countryside, or maybe happier at the park, or whatever it is. Does that hold over time, or is it that we have to have difficulty in order to understand and to really integrate and register that we're happy?
It holds over time, or at least it holds over large groups of people. Some of the biggest studies have used 165,000 people in the UK to understand where are people more or less happy. Mm-hmm. Some things we are less sure of. For example, there's a lot of debate whether there is a U-shaped curve in terms of happiness and age. So a lot of studies have shown until recently that people, when they're young, report high levels of happiness, and when they're old, report high levels of happiness. Mid-40s is the low point. Actually, I'm 44, which is, statistically speaking, the global low point for happiness. So I'm at rock bottom, apparently. But the question is, does that hold over time? Because maybe it's a generational thing. So we won't know until the young people that are young today are old, whether that sort of U-shape is something that we can see across generations.
We'll be right back with more from Meik in just a few moments. And we're back with Meik Wiking, founder of the Happiness Research Institute.
So I wrote about Hygge first back in 2016. The little book of Hygge, it was called. And I think it was because we gave a name to an emotion that people had already been experiencing, but didn't know there was a name for. So Hygge happened everywhere. It happened in the US, it happened in Denmark, it happened in Sweden, and it happened in Australia. But Danes had a word to describe that situation. And that's what we gave people back in 2016 with the book. I remember one French lady wrote me. She wrote, I've been having Hygge all my life. I just didn't know there was a word for it. And she wrote, earlier I would have had an afternoon with my 2 kids, and we would have been on the sofa with some biscuits and some tea, and I would have called that a lazy afternoon. Now I call it a hyggelig afternoon. And I thought that's great that we removed the guilt from what should be a nice activity with your kids. And the new book I've written, My Hygge Home, is about how do we turn a house into a home? How do we make it a place of warm atmosphere, of connection? And the idea for that book came when a Canadian guy told me he had read the original Hygge book. And there's a lot of focus on lighting. There's a lot of focus on candles in the book because candles have a big impact on the atmosphere in a room. So he went out and he bought some candle holders and he started to light candles for dinner at home with his wife and kids. They had 3 teenage sons. And when he started to light the candles for dinner, the teenagers, they started to tease their dad. Dad, what's going on with the candles? Do you want to have some romantic time with mom? Should we leave? But he told me, now the boys, they actually light the candles for dinner. And it became this ritual of family dinners. And most importantly, he says, our family dinners now last 15 to 20 minutes longer because the candles puts the boys in a storytelling mode. So instead of just sitting down, shoveling down their food, they sit down, they sip their wine, and they talk about their day. So I thought, isn't it interesting how a little change around the dinner table, a simple thing like a candle, changes how a family interact? And what else can we do to change how we act? What else can we do to stack the deck in our favor when it comes to sort of the architecture of happiness?
I love that. And you said the architecture of happiness, which just the idea of being able to be an architect of your own life and the experience of said life. I think a lot of us spend much of our time concerned about the things out of our locus of control and not aware of how much power we have and also how simple things can be. Like the idea of just, I found myself getting so excited putting candles in my virtual basket to order because I could imagine what they would look and feel like in my space. The idea that those children became storytellers and stayed at dinner longer, and so that extended and heightened connection is such a simple lever that we can pull, which I think many times, and especially today with technology, with everything that we have, we're looking for every possible lever. It's getting more and more complicated, but part of what I feel like you're saying is just that Hygge is simplicity.
It is simplicity, and I think it's also sort of embracing that we can actually sometimes decouple wealth from well-being, that happiness doesn't have to come with a price tag. I also try to explain what Hygge is about by saying that Hygge is the good life on a low budget. So it's simple pleasures. It's, baking your own bread and enjoying the smell and taste of that. It's enjoying a good book by the window when there's a storm outside. It's understanding that often the good things in life are, in fact, free. But I think also if we can sort of zoom back a little bit, I think we need to understand that we need to look at happiness the same way we look at health. That there are some things that we have control over with our health and with our happiness. When it comes to health, I can choose to smoke or not, and I know what's best for my health. I can also choose what I spend my time on, which is going to impact my happiness in different ways. But there's also our surroundings. Where you live in the US is going to impact your health, your longevity, the quality of the healthcare in your city, in your state, the level of air pollution in your city, that's going to impact your health. And also your happiness is going to be impacted by where you live, where you're born in the world. There's a reason why we often see the Nordic countries doing really well in happiness rankings, and where you live within that country. But also if you zoom in on your street, whether you consider your neighbor a good friend, whether you have dinner with your neighbors, whether you borrow tools from each other, that is actually impacted by the street design. You are far more likely to be good friends with your neighbor if you live in a cul-de-sac. So the way you design your cities, the way you design your streets, the way you design your home is also going to impact your behavior and what you do and your happiness levels. And I think the candles around the dinner table is a great example of that.
You're reminding me of a time 5 years ago or so. I was living in San Francisco. I stayed just for a year, and I used to call it the worst year of my life, like the most miserable year. I didn't like San Francisco. I didn't love where I lived. I didn't have a whole bunch of friends in the area. My family wasn't too far away. But I had these really high expectations when I moved there for what it would be like. And then I got there and it was like almost every expectation fell through the floor. The job I was in, I didn't love. I mean, I had like financial trouble. There was so much stuff. And so I definitely became depressed. And at the same time, I kind of made up, if I'm really honest with myself, I made up that there was nothing I could change about my situation. And it was actually that like deep low that brought me to where I am now, which is a very different place. But it took a while. And so as you're describing this, I'm thinking about how many people, number one, may feel like right now, whatever situation they're in, they can't change. Like for me, it was like I couldn't get out of the apartment that I was in. I had to stay in that lease or it would have cost me a lot of money. I couldn't leave San Francisco at the time. I couldn't. That's like kind of what was rolling around in my mind. But as we're talking, and of course I know this now, but I'm like, I could have. Like there were so many things I could have done that I chose not to do. But in the moment, it didn't feel like a choice. And in the moment, I was super unhappy.
That makes a lot of sense. Also, if you had this expectation of San Francisco and your life there being all perfect, and not that people shouldn't have hopes and high hopes for the future, but expectations matter. And one of my favorite studies actually looks at how people who support different football teams, how they react when their teams wins or loses. And can see, when Leah's favorite football team won, she was happier for about 4 hours. But when they lost, she was much less happy than compared to being happy when they won. So we can see people hate losing more than they like winning. There's a loss aversion. But we could also go back in time and say, did Leah expect her favorite football team to win or lose based on the book making odds at the time? And you can see if people expected their team to win and they then lost, then the loss was even worse for their happiness. So expectations matter. And that's one of the I think, challenges we have as a species. And another challenge in that same sort of field is what we in happiness research call the hedonic treadmill, meaning that we're really good at raising the bar for what we feel we need in order to be happy. And we're really good at setting goals. And sometimes we reach that goal and we accomplish things and we get that new title or that apartment in San Francisco or job in San Francisco. And then we might be happy with that for a while, but then, we find another goal. So unfortunate to be a happiness researcher that bursts people's bubbles, but there's no one thing in life that we can accomplish that is going to make us permanently happy.
And isn't that a good thing?
I think the awareness of it is a good thing because it forces us to embrace that old cliche of enjoying the journey and not the destination, because there's no one title, there's no one private jet or whatever people dream of that is going to make people permanently happy. And I think, acknowledging that the hedonic treadmill exists and embracing that we really need to enjoy the journey is really important.
So let me ask you this, like when things aren't good, quote unquote, in life, when circumstances, our external environment isn't quote unquote good or isn't what we expected, should we expect that we should be able to cultivate happiness within ourselves anyway? Should we cultivate Hygge and like coziness and get cozy with that? Like what's the real expectation we should have so that we're approaching difficulties or moments of unhappiness in a prepared and like aware way of where we should be getting to emotionally?
I think we should do what you did in San Francisco. I think we should be aware of our emotions. You said you felt unhappy in San Francisco. That's the first step to doing something about it. And then you beat yourself up over the fact that you didn't do something right away, but eventually you acknowledge the issue and change your circumstances. So I don't think we should gloss over when we are unhappy. I think that's an important emotion to have as well, and hopefully we can then find ways out of that. And that's sort of the sort of bigger unhappiness. But there's also sort of the bad days or the events that can perhaps make us grumpy, like missing a a flight or being stuck in traffic. What I try to do there is I ask myself, 6 months from now, is this going to matter? Is this going to impact my quality of life? And most often it's not. And that sort of helps me sort of get over myself in those situations.
Yeah, it makes me think it's like I can be unhappy in the moment and life still be good, which is why I love the field of positive psychology, because it's like, what is the good life versus what is my moment of, my hedonic pleasure moment? And I'm not seeking just pleasure. I'm trying to understand the grand scheme of things. Am I feeling like I'm flourishing? Am I thriving? And letting that sort of be a barometer versus in the moment, and then taking the downward spiral, which we all do so often. I do it a lot. It's like the one thing and the other thing and the other thing, and then we've piled a bunch of things on that make us, quote unquote, feel unhappy. But in truth, we've just attached ourselves to moments instead of zoomed out and said, but in the grand scheme, life is still good enough.
Right.
Is there good enough? Is there best? Like, I think about, people who say, I'm happy enough, like, I'm okay enough. Would you call that the same thing as satisfaction or contentment? Or do we also sometimes hide from the possibility of being happier because we don't want to have high expectations for life?
I don't think we should beat up contentment. I think contentment is a very good foundation for being happy. I don't think we should let perfect be the enemy of the good. I think there's always going to be something, right? There's always going to be something that we can focus on that irritates us, or things we should have done, or things that could be better. There's life, and it's messy and it's chaotic, and that's the human experience. And I don't know anybody who are having a perfect life full of nothing but happiness. I think that's just, the situation we're in. Hopefully we get to experience some happy moments, and some happy days, maybe some happy years even. Hopefully we get some sense of connection with our loved ones. Hopefully we also get some pleasure, some amazing meals, and some good laughs with our friends. But we might also experience a lot of other things. And I think that's just part of being human.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you give for people, it feels like our conversation has been about hygge and also about happiness, but it's kind of overall like, how do we get through life? How do we weather the ups and downs, based on your research, because you're so deep in this? What advice would you give somebody today who's like, gosh, I do want to be a little happier? What could they do?
In Denmark, we often talk about something called the ABC for mental health, which I think is one of the sort of best universal advices we can give. It's difficult to dish out a universal advice because people are going to be in different situations. But I think this one is a good candidate. So the ABC for mental health stands for act, belong, commit. So it means doing something active, doing something together with other people, and, as the theme of your podcast is, doing something meaningful. But of course, if we're unhappy with where we are in life, we need other strategies as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, Meik. So with that, I'd love to have you complete these 3 statements for me. The first is, better humans are.
I would turn it around, actually, if I can. I would say happier humans are better humans.
My second statement for you to complete then, happier work is?
Good quality lawnmower and a big lawn to mow.
It's a good metaphor. I'll let you use that one. All right. And then I'll ask you the last one, or have you complete the last one with your happier shift. A happier world has?
Less loneliness. When we look at what are predictors of happiness, a sense of connection is one of the best predictors that we can find. And if I could have sort of one policy proposal, it would be that everybody gets an additional good friend, which is tricky from a policy point of view. But across countries, across cultures, having a sense of connection with other ones is often one of the keys to happiness.
Love it. Thank you so much, Meik, for joining me. This was so fun, and I've learned a lot. I'm taking a lot away about both Hygge, which I think my pronunciation's changed every time I've said it in this conversation, and about happiness. I will get it.
I think you nailed it, at least one of the times.
That was Meik Viking, author of The Little Book of Hygge and founder of the Happiness Research Institute. If you liked this conversation, text it to the first person who comes to mind. You never know how it could help them out. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Grace Rubin and Emily Reeves. Asaf Gadron is our sound engineer. He makes sure we sound good in the studio. Tim Boland mixed our show. Andres Cardona is our video producer. We get additional support from Alex Kuznetsova and Ali McPherson. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Enrique Montalvo is our executive producer. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Maya Pope-Chappelle is director of content and audience development. Courtney Coop is head of original programming. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. And I'm Leah Smart. Thanks for coming with me, and I'll see you next week.